Over the last few years, there's been a massive wave of appreciation for Raditz. For a character that usually shines in the what-if corners of the series, the demand for his return to the official canon has never been higher. And today, we're leaning into that momentum with a Sparking Zero custom battle showcase that gives the long-lost Saiyan brother the spotlight he deserves. If you're new here, this is a series where I highlight your Sparking Zero custom battles. If you made your own, drop the codes in the comment section below so I can check them out for a future episode. That's enough yapping, let's get into the first one. Our story begins at the end of the Saiyan Saga. After falling to Piccolo's special beam cannon, Raditz finds himself wandering the wastelands of hell. Driven by the sting of his defeat at the hands of his low-class brother, he spends years in isolation sharpening his power. Time stretches on and the memory of Goku lingers in the background of his thoughts. Years pass before another familiar face arrives. Nappa, also wandering the lands after his execution by Vegeta. In typical fashion, Nappa attempts to assert his dominance through his power level, leading to our first matchup. Raditz quickly proves that the old Saiyan hierarchy is dead. His growth in the afterlife has left Nappa completely outclassed. The years of isolation and training have reshaped him. Their clash begins to draw attention. Frieza and King Cold, fresh off their defeat on Earth by the hands of another Saiyan. Frieza is looking for a Saiyan-shaped punching bag to vent his frustrations. Raditz and Nappa don't even recognize him at first, dismissing him as just another soul in hell. It's only after a very brutal exchange that they realize they've traded blows with the former Emperor. But rather than cowering, Raditz finds a new ceiling to shatter. He studies the power Frieza displayed and measures the distance between them. His training continues with a new focus in sight, and the belief settles in that gap can be closed with just enough time. Years pass inside hell and Raditz and Nappa stand before Frieza once more. This time he's not alone. Cell waits at his side, aiding another towering presence to that confrontation. But before that fight can even begin, a massive force crashes into the scene, sending Cell flying. Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan, has arrived in hell, and immediately targets Raditz, sensing the familiar scent of Goku's bloodline. Frieza jumps into the fight halfway through and decides to try his luck. This attempt doesn't last long. Broly's power keeps building as the battle spirals further and further out of control, and the only option left is to try and paralyze him long enough for Nappa to finish things. Nappa begins charging a full power energy beam, preparing to knock Broly out in a single strike, as Frieza tries to paralyze him with his psychokinesis. But Broly moves too fast for Frieza and knocks him aside, sending the former Emperor crashing out of the fight. Raditz flies back in and re-enters the battle, managing to hold Broly off just long enough for the plan to move forward. He holds Broly in place, shouting for Nappa to fire a full-power mouth cannon regardless of who's in the way. The blast connects, subduing the legend while it appears Raditz was vaporized in the crossfire. In the final moments before the episode ends, the camera cuts to Cell. He used instant transmission at the last minute to pull Raditz out of the attack. Now the thematic tie-in here is clever. Not only is it a fun Raditz story, but if you recall the ending of Bio Broly, Goku and Pikkon were dispatched to hell to deal with Broly's rampage. This story fits perfectly into that exact window of time. Beyond that connection, the core idea here is really what stood out to me. Raditz spent years reflecting on his defeat on Earth and used that memory as a motivation to grow stronger. The experience stays with him and shapes the way he approaches every fight afterwards. Seeing Raditz actually learn from a tactical mistake that killed him on Earth is such a great touch. Now, he still isn't necessarily a good person. He likely still harbors a grudge, and the thought of revenge probably hasn't gone anywhere, but the new approach to growth is dangerous. By the end of all of it, the whole scenario feels like a genuine Dragon Ball filler episode, and I mean that in the best way possible. For years, Frieza sat at the absolute peak of the universe, a powerhouse whose authority spanned across various planets and different solar systems. His reality didn't fracture until Namek, where his worst nightmare finally stared him down face to face. We know this story very well. It's the most iconic fight in the Dragon Ball series and one of the most iconic fights in media. But this story explores a timeline where that fight takes a much darker route. You take control of Frieza as he faces the Super Saiyan of legend. At first, you're fighting an uphill battle in your final form, and even after pushing into that bulky 100% full power state, you still pale in comparison to Goku's overwhelming golden light. The first divergence happens at that moment. The moment of Frieza's greatest desperation. As everything seems to be lost, something changes. Now, instead of losing himself to a blind rage or a sloppy self-destructive finish, Frieza reaches deep into his own biological potential. Facing death at the hands of his worst nightmare, he finds something buried within his DNA and forces an ascension. He emerges in this fight in a golden form years before he was ever meant to. He's confused at what's occurred just as much as Goku, but he instantly seizes control of the battlefield and ends the Saiyan threat once and for all. Playing through this is incredible. The first two stages are genuinely difficult, pushing your skills to the limit against an opponent who feels almost untouchable. The reward for surviving that onslaught is the transformation, where the power gap becomes so immense that the gameplay shifts into a total power fantasy. I'm also very fascinated by where this story goes next. Frieza would obviously head straight to Earth to tie up loose ends, leaving the remaining Z fighters to scramble for the plan to either hide or face a foe that originally rivaled the Super Saiyan God. Even without the months of training he had in the original series, this version of Frieza would likely still dwarf any of the major villains we know. At this point in history, there's simply nobody left to stand in his way. Even with this being a shorter custom battle, the story leaves you wanting more while remaining remarkably satisfied with its conclusion. It's a great reminder that sometimes even the greatest stories don't need to expand more than necessary to leave a very lasting impact. Now this next entry takes place over the span of 3 separate missions and completely redirected my expectations of where the narrative was headed. We start with Shenron being summoned to revive the heavy hitters, Frieza, Cell, and Kid Buu, who immediately begin laying waste to Earth. Goku teleports in to contain the damage, but midway through his struggling bout with the powered up Kid Buu, Vegeta arrives to effortlessly wipe the floor with him. Just as you think you're setting into a standard cleanup mission, the real threat reveals itself. A figure resembling Goku appears, and obliterates Frieza with a single blast. But then, things take a surreal turn. Vegeta suddenly swaps sides and begins hunting us down. At first glance it feels like a familiar Goku Black scenario, but the truth is much more insane. This isn't Zamasu, it's Dr. Wheelo, who's been jumping dimensions after successfully stealing Goku's body in another universe. To make matters worse, he's accompanied by a specialized android version of Vegeta known as a Bioman, who can shift his appearance between Z Vegeta and Baby Vegeta. The match escalates as our universe Vegeta jumps in to help Goku hold the line, but in a desperate move, Bioman absorbs Wheelo Goku to reach a terrifying new phase. This new foe becomes an immovable wall. We can't even scratch him. It forces the heroes into a corner where Vegeta realizes that fusion is the only way to win this bout. Piccolo steps in to stall the android, waiting nearby in case he was needed. In the background, Gogeta is formed. The tide flips instantly. Within moments, the android falls. The fusion separates, but from beneath the debris, Wheelo's primary mechanical body emerges, fully intact and reinforced. However, the exhaustion of the fight sets in after the defusion, and the creator takes a genius approach here by stripping Goku and Vegeta of all their abilities, including flight and their skills, perfectly conveying how physically spent they are. Piccolo telepathically calls out to Gohan, Goten, and Trunks, and within moments they arrive as reinforcements. Gohan rushes in to shield his father but is struck down almost immediately, and in anger, Goten fires a Kamehameha that fails to make an impact on Dr. Wheelo. Trunks tells the other young Saiyan that they need to fuse against the machine, but despite the power of Gotenks, it ends with a similar result. The finale becomes a high-stake gamble. Vegeta tells Goku to begin gathering energy for a Spirit Bomb. You're left alone against Wheelo, holding the line as Goku gathers the energy he needs. But when the attack is finally released, Wheelo withstands it. In a brilliant bit of foresight, it's revealed that Piccolo had Dende coordinate with the Namekians to summon Purunga as a backup as they use the dragon to restore Goku's strength. Now back at full strength, he powers up to Super Saiyan 3 and the remaining Z-Fires lend what strength they have left into Goku. Goku then drives through the metal shell of Wheelo and ends the battle with a Dragon Fist, saving the planet once again. Now you guys know how much I enjoy seeing the movies come back and getting reworked, and this one stands out by bringing back a forgotten villain and giving him a completely updated method of attacking. From start to finish, the story kept me surprised, taking turns that felt fresh without ever becoming overwhelming. It even captures that classic Dragon Ball Z movie energy perfectly, right down to that final shot of Super Saiyan 3 Goku standing victorious. And that's where I'll stop it for now. These episodes have been great at subverting expectations without losing the spirit of the series. Whether it's Frieza's desperate evolution on Namek or the bizarre multi-dimensional threat of a body-snatching Dr. Wheelo, each one proves that there's still so much more untapped potential in the Sparking Zero custom battles. It's rare to find fan projects that feel this complete while still making you wish there was just one more chapter to play through. But as always, I want to know what you guys think of these stories. If Frieza had ascended to his golden form on Namek, do you think anyone in the universe could have stopped his return to Earth, or was the timeline doomed the moment Goku fell? And what about the Wheelo twist? Did you see the Bioman reveal coming, or were you convinced we were looking at another Goku Black scenario? What did you guys think about the new story for Raditz? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into Sparking Zero's custom battles. I've been your local overanalyzer Artellings, and I hope you have yourself a damn good one.